Marcus Whitfield had stopped believing in miracles the day his wife Sarah died giving birth to their stillborn daughter 3 winters ago. The small farmhouse at the edge of Millbrook Valley had grown quiet since then, filled only with the echo of his boots on hardwood floors and the occasional creak of settling timber. He'd learned to live with silence the way some men learn to live with chronic pain, accepting it as part of the landscape of their days. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That October morning started like any other. The mist hung low over the pasture, clinging to fence posts and barn doors like cobwebs made of vapor. Marcus pulled on his worn leather jacket and stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp air that carried hints of dying leaves and distant wood smoke. The routine was always the same: check the animals, mend whatever needed mending, and try not to think about the empty rooms behind him. The barn stood at the far edge of his property, a weathered structure his grandfather had built with his own hands back in 1952. Its red paint had faded to the color of dried blood, and the roof showed patches where Marcus had replaced shingles over the years. Inside, it smelled of hay and old wood, and the lingering sweetness of summer grain. He kept only 3 horses now, down from the dozen he'd maintained when Sarah was alive and they dreamed of running a proper stable. Thunder, his black stallion, nickered softly as Marcus approached with a bucket of oats. The horse had been Sarah's favorite, a gentle giant despite his imposing name. Marcus ran his hand along Thunder's neck, feeling the warmth of living muscle beneath the glossy coat. These moments of connection with the animals were often the only times he felt truly present anymore, anchored to something real and breathing. He was measuring out the morning feed when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost dismissed it as wind through the rafters. But there it was again, a soft rustling from the hayloft above, different from the usual scurrying of barn cats or the flutter of nesting sparrows. Marcus paused, listening. The sound came once more, deliberate and careful, like someone trying very hard not to be heard. His first thought was of teenagers from town, maybe using his barn as a meeting place or hiding spot. It wouldn't be the first time. The Whitfield property sat far enough from the main road that kids sometimes thought it was abandoned. He climbed the wooden ladder slowly, each rung creaking under his weight. The loft stretched before him, filled with golden bales of hay stacked in neat rows, creating shadowy corridors between them. The smell hit him first, not unpleasant, just different, human. The scent of someone who had been living rough, sleeping in clothes worn too long, eating whatever they could find. Marcus moved carefully between the hay bales, following his instincts more than his eyes. In the far corner, where the morning light barely reached, he found her. She couldn't have been more than 17, maybe 18 at most. Her dark hair was tangled and unwashed, hanging in limp strands around a face that might have been pretty under different circumstances. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold-wide, frightened, the color of autumn leaves, and holding a wariness that spoke of too much hardship for someone so young. She was pressed back against the barn wall, knees drawn up to her chest, and even in the dim light, Marcus could see the unmistakable curve of her belly beneath a too large flannel shirt. She was pregnant. Very pregnant, by the look of it. They stared at each other for a long moment, neither moving, neither speaking. Marcus could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, like a cornered animal deciding whether to run or fight. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, the universal gesture of peace. "It's okay," he said quietly, his voice rusty from disuse. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't respond, just watched him with those wary eyes. Up close, he could see she was shivering despite the flannel shirt and what looked like several layers underneath. Her lips had a bluish tinge that spoke of too many cold nights, and her hands, wrapped around her knees, were red and chapped. "How long have you been up here?" he asked, settling back on his heels to make himself less threatening. Still no answer. But her eyes flickered briefly to a small nest she'd made in the hay, a worn blanket, a backpack that had seen better days, and what looked like empty food containers carefully arranged to catch rainwater from a small leak in the roof. "My name's Marcus," he continued, keeping his voice low and steady. "This is my barn, my farm. You're not in trouble. I just ... He paused, studying her face. "You look like you could use some help." At the word help, something shifted in her expression. Not trust exactly, but a flicker of something that might have been hope quickly suppressed. She pulled her knees tighter to her chest, and Marcus noticed her wince slightly as she moved. "When's the baby due?" he asked gently. This time she did speak, just barely above a whisper. "Soon." The single word carried the weight of fear, uncertainty, and bone-deep exhaustion. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he'd thought buried with Sarah. Protectiveness, maybe. Or recognition. Of someone else carrying more than they should have to bear alone. "Have you been to a doctor?" he asked. She shook her head, and Marcus saw tears gathering in her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. "Are you alone?" Another nod, and this time a tear did escape, tracking down her dirt-smudged cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angrily, as if crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Marcus sat back fully, no longer crouching, making himself comfortable in the hay. The movement seemed to reassure her slightly. "Predators don't sit down." "What's your name?" She hesitated for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Emma." "Emma," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt. "That's a good name. My grandmother's name was Emma." This small piece of information seemed to crack something in her composure. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and for a moment she looked exactly like what she was, a scared, pregnant teenager who had been carrying the weight of the world alone. "Emma, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to know you can say no. Would you like to come inside? Get warm, maybe have something to eat?" The longing in her eyes was immediate and intense, but she shook her head. I can't get you in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" She pressed her lips together, the wariness returning in full force. Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across her face, the desire for help warring with whatever had driven her to hide in a stranger's barn in the first place. "Look," he said finally, "I'm not going to force you to do anything, but it's getting colder every night, and that baby ... He gestured gently toward her belly. "That baby needs its mama to be healthy and warm. You can't take care of it if you're not taking care of yourself." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I don't know how to take care of anything." The raw honesty in her voice hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought of Sarah, of the plans they'd made, the nursery they'd painted yellow because they'd wanted to be surprised. The baby clothes still folded in the dresser drawer he couldn't bring himself to empty. "Nobody does," he said quietly. "Not really. We all just figure it out as we go." Emma studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded once, very slightly. "Just for a little while," she said, "until I can figure out what to do next." Marcus stood slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Just for as long as you need." He helped her to her feet, noting how she favored her left side and how her breathing became labored with even that small exertion. The backpack she gathered contained pitifully few possessions: a change of clothes, a water bottle, a small first aid kit, and a dog-eared paperback book with a torn cover. The walk from the barn to the house felt longer than usual. Emma moved slowly, pausing every few steps to catch her breath. Marcus found himself adjusting his pace without thinking about it, the same way he'd learned to walk slower when Sarah was in her final months of pregnancy. The memory caught him off guard, sharp and bittersweet. The farmhouse looked different, with another person approaching it. Marcus tried to see it through Emma's eyes, the peeling paint on the shutters, The front porch that sagged slightly on one side, the flower boxes that had been empty since Sarah died. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and warm, with smoke curling from the chimney and yellow light glowing in the windows. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and the remnants of his simple breakfast. Emma stood in the doorway, taking it all in. The worn but comfortable furniture, the photographs on the mantel, the kitchen visible through an open archway. Her eyes lingered on a woman's sweater draped over the back of a chair, and Marcus realized he'd never moved Sarah's things, had simply left them where she'd placed them, as if she might return at any moment. "Sit," he said, guiding her to the couch. "Let me get you something to eat." She perched on the edge of the cushion, as if ready to bolt at any moment, her hands resting protectively over her belly. Marcus could see her taking in every detail of the room, the exits, the windows, the potential threats and escapes. It was the behavior of someone who had learned to be constantly vigilant, always ready to run. In the kitchen, Marcus moved quietly, assembling a plate of food. Leftover chicken from last night's dinner, fresh bread from the bakery in town, an apple from the tree in his backyard. Simple food but nourishing. He heated water for tea, choosing chamomile over coffee, remembering something Sarah had told him about caffeine in pregnancy. When he returned to the living room, Emma was exactly where he'd left her, though her eyes were closed and her head had tilted back against the couch. She looked younger in sleep, the lines of worry and fear temporarily smoothed away. But even unconscious, one hand remained protectively curved over her belly, preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus set the food on the coffee table and settled into the chair across from her, careful not to wake her. He used the quiet moment to really look at her, to try to piece together her story from the evidence before him. Her clothes were clean, but worn, the kind of garments you'd find at a thrift store or charity donation center. Her shoes were sturdy but too big, stuffed with what looked like newspaper to make them fit. She wore no jewelry except for a thin silver chain around her neck, the pendant hidden beneath her shirt. Most telling were her hands. Despite her youth, they showed the calluses and small scars of someone who'd worked hard, done manual labor. Her fingernails were bitten short, and there was a fresh scrape across her knuckles that looked like it came from a fall or a scramble through rough terrain. But it was the way she held herself, even in sleep, that told the real story. The protective curl of her body, the way she'd positioned herself to see both the front door and the window, the constant awareness even in unconsciousness, these were the markers of someone who'd learned that safety was temporary and danger could come from anywhere. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked confused, disoriented, and then reality crashed back. She sat up quickly, too quickly, and gasped as the movement sent pain through her body. "Easy, Marcus." Sighed. "You're safe. You're in my house, remember?" Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep. I should go." "You should eat," Marcus said firmly but kindly. "And then we should talk about getting you to a doctor." Emma's face went pale. No doctors." "I can't." "Emma," Marcus interrupted gently. "How far along are you?" She looked down at her belly, her hands moving protectively over the curve. 8 months, maybe 9. "I'm not sure exactly." "And you haven't seen anyone?" "Haven't had any checkups." She shook her head, tears threatening. "Again, I couldn't. I don't have insurance. I don't have money. I don't have." She trailed off, overwhelmed. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but serious. "That baby could come any day now. You need to be somewhere safe when it does, with people who know how to help." "I know," she whispered. "I know, but I can't. If they find me... who's going to find you?" Emma's mouth clamped shut, the wariness returning in full force. Marcus could see he'd pushed too hard, too fast. He sat back, giving her space. Okay, he said. We don't have to talk about that right now. But you need to eat, and you need to rest properly. Can we agree on that much? Emma nodded reluctantly and reached for the plate. She ate slowly at first, as if she wasn't sure the food was really for her, then with increasing hunger. Marcus watched her devour the chicken and bread, and when she finished, he brought her another apple and a glass of milk. When did you last have a real meal? He asked. Emma paused, the glass halfway to her lips. I had some crackers yesterday. And I found some berries by the creek the day before yesterday. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Emma, you're eating for two. You can't survive on crackers and berries. I know, she said defensively. I was trying to find work, but nobody wants to hire someone who's... She gestured to her belly, and I ran out of money weeks ago. Where did you come from? Where's your family? The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She set down the glass and wrapped her arms around herself. I don't have a family, not anymore. The finality in her voice told Marcus this was another door she wasn't ready to open. He changed tactics. What about the baby's father? Emma's expression hardened. He's not in the picture. By choice or by circumstance? She looked at him sharply, as if trying to determine whether the question came from judgment or genuine concern. Whatever she saw in his face must have convinced her of the latter because some of the tension left her shoulders. It's complicated, she said finally. Marcus nodded. Most things worth talking about are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Emma finishing her milk while Marcus tried to process the situation. A pregnant teenager, alone and clearly running from something or someone, had been living in his barn for who knew how long. The decent thing to do was obvious, but the complications were equally clear. Getting involved in someone else's troubles was the last thing he'd thought he wanted after 3 years of carefully constructed solitude. But as he watched Emma's hand move in small, unconscious circles over her belly, he thought about Sarah and the baby they'd lost. He thought about the nursery upstairs, still painted yellow, still waiting. He thought about the emptiness that had become his constant companion and the way it had lifted, just slightly, when Emma had whispered her name. Emma, he said finally, I want to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it before you answer. She looked up at him, alert and wary. Stay here, he said. Not just for tonight, but until the baby comes. Let me help you get proper medical care. Let me help you figure out what comes next. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. But you don't even know me. You don't know what I've done, what I'm running from. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. I know you're young and pregnant and scared. I know you've been living in my barn for weeks without taking so much as an apple from my tree. I know you tried to survive on your own rather than burden a stranger. That tells me a lot about who you are. It's not that simple, Emma said, but... Her voice lacked conviction. Most things aren't, Marcus replied. But some things are. You need help. I can help. That's simple enough. Emma stared at him, searching his face for ulterior motives, hidden agendas. The catch that experience had taught her was always there, when she didn't find any fresh tears spilled over. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for me? Marcus thought about all the reasons he could give her. About Christian charity and human decency. About having more space and resources than he needed. About the way helping others could fill the hollow places in your own life. But in the end, he told her the truth. Because someone should have helped. You before now, he said quietly. And because I know what it's like to lose a baby. I don't want that to happen to you if there's anything I can do to prevent it. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with shared pain and unexpected understanding. Emma's hand moved to the silver chain around her neck, fingering the hidden pendant as if it were a talisman. If I stay, she said finally, if I let You help me. I need you to understand something. I can't go to the police. I can't have my name on official records. I need to stay invisible. Are you in legal trouble? Emma hesitated. Not the kind you're thinking of. I haven't committed any crimes, but there are people who can't know where I am. People who would hurt me and the baby if they found us. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Who would hurt a pregnant girl? Emma's laugh was bitter and devoid of humor. You'd be surprised what people are capable of when they feel like they own you. The implication in her words was clear, and Marcus felt a surge of protective anger that surprised him with its intensity. They don't own you, he said firmly. Nobody owns you. You say that like it's a choice, Emma replied. Like I can just decide to be free and make it so. Maybe not, Marcus said. But maybe you can decide to let someone help you try. Emma was quiet for a long time, her internal struggle visible on her face. Finally she nodded once, a quick, decisive movement. Okay, she said. But if things get complicated, if staying here puts you in danger, I'll leave. I won't let you get hurt because of me. Fair enough, Marcus said. But I get to make my own decisions about what risks I'm willing to take. Emma managed a small smile, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing glimpses of the girl she might have been under different circumstances. I should warn you, she said. I'm not exactly easy to live with. I don't sleep well, I'm not much of a cook, and I have a tendency to jump at shadows. I don't sleep well either, Marcus said. I can do the cooking, and as for jumping at shadows, well, sometimes the shadows are worth jumping at. We'll figure it out. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus helped Emma settle into the spare bedroom upstairs. It was a simple room with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the pasture. Sarah had used it as a sewing room, and some of her things were still there. A basket of fabric scraps, a sewing machine covered with a sheet, a rocking chair in the corner. Emma noticed the rocking chair immediately. Was she your wife? She asked quietly. Marcus nodded. Sarah, she died 3 years ago. I'm sorry, Emma said, and Marcus could hear that she meant it. Was she pregnant? Yes. We lost them both. Emma's hand moved to her belly. I'm sorry, she said again, and this time the words carried the weight of someone who understood that some losses were too big for ordinary condolences. That evening, as Marcus prepared dinner, he found himself moving differently in his own kitchen. He was cooking for two now, thinking about nutritious meals and foods that would be easy on a pregnant woman's stomach. The change felt strange but not unwelcome, like waking up muscles that had been asleep too long. Emma appeared in the doorway as he was setting the table. She'd changed into clean clothes, the same worn flannel shirt, but with different jeans, and she'd managed to comb the tangles from her hair. The improvement was remarkable, revealing fine features and clear skin beneath the dirt and exhaustion. Can I help? She asked. You can sit, Marcus said. You've been taking care of yourself alone for months. Let someone else take care of you for a change. Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she settled into one of the kitchen chairs. Marcus served her generous portions of beef stew and fresh bread, and once again she ate with the focused intensity of someone who'd been hungry for too long. This is really good, she said between bites. I haven't had anything this good in ... In how long? Marcus prompted gently. Emma paused, calculating. Before I left home. So about 4 months. Where was home? Emma's spoon stilled in her bowl. North of here, a small town you probably never heard of. Marcus didn't push for details, but he filed the information away. 4 months on the road, pregnant and alone. The math was sobering. After dinner, they sat in the living room, Emma on the couch with her feet tucked under her, Marcus in his usual chair. The fire crackled in the hearth, and for the first time in years, the house felt occupied rather than just inhabited. Marcus, Emma said suddenly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you call the police when you found me? Or social services or someone? Marcus considered the question. Would that have helped you? No, Emma admitted. It would have made things worse. Then why would I do it? Emma stared at him. Most people would have thought it was the right thing to do. Most people don't know your situation, Marcus said. I don't know it either, not fully. But I know enough to trust that you're the best judge of what's safe for you and your baby. Even if it means harboring a fugitive. Are you a fugitive? Emma was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe, not from the law, but from people who think they have the right to control my life. Then you're not a fugitive, Marcus said firmly. You're a person exercising her right to freedom. Emma's eyes filled with tears again. It's not that simple. Tell me why not. Emma looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. Because the people I ran from have money and connections, and they don't like to lose things they consider theirs. Because I'm 17 and pregnant, and nobody believes teenage girls when they say they're in danger. Because the system is supposed to protect people like me, but it doesn't always work that way. The pieces were starting to form a picture in Marcus's mind, and he didn't like what he was seeing. Emma, are you saying someone was holding you against your will? I'm saying that freedom is more complicated than you think when you're young, and have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Marcus felt the familiar surge of protective anger, but he kept his voice calm. You have somewhere to go now. You have someone to turn to. Emma looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked young. Not like a hardened survivor or a wary fugitive, but like a scared teenager who desperately wanted to believe that help was possible. What if they find me? She whispered. Then we'll deal with it, Marcus said. Together. You don't understand what you're saying. These aren't people you can reason with or scare off. They have resources, they have reach. Emma, Marcus interrupted gently. I may be a simple farmer, but I'm not helpless. I have resources too. I have friends, I have connections of my own. And I have something they don't. What's that? The right to be here. This is my land, my home. You're my guest. Whatever claim they think they have on you doesn't extend to my property. Emma stared at him, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. You really mean that? I really do. That night, Marcus lay in his bed listening to the sounds of another person in his house. The creak of floorboards overhead, the whisper of water through pipes, the soft closing of a door. It had been 3 years since he'd shared his space with anyone, and the adjustment was both comforting and unsettling. He thought about Emma's story, the pieces she'd revealed and the ones she was still holding back. A 17-year-old girl, pregnant and on the run from people with money and connections who considered her their property. The implications made his stomach churn, but they also crystallized his resolve. Whatever Emma was running from, she wouldn't have to face it alone anymore. In the room above, Emma lay in the first real bed she'd slept in for months, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the day's events. Part of her was still waiting for the catch, for Marcus to reveal his true motives, or for the situation to turn dangerous. But another part of her, the part that had been slowly dying during her months on the road, was beginning to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found sanctuary. Her hand moved to her belly, feeling the baby's movements beneath her palm. We might be okay, she whispered to the life growing inside her. For the first time in months, we might actually be okay. The first week passed in careful steps and measured conversations. Emma moved through the farmhouse like a ghost learning to be solid again, touching surfaces tentatively as if testing whether they were real. She helped where she could, folding laundry with methodical precision, washing dishes until they gleamed, sweeping floors that were already clean. Marcus recognized the behavior for what it was, the desperate need to earn her place, to prove her worth through usefulness. You don't have to work for your keep, he told her one morning as he found her scrubbing the kitchen counters for the third time that week. Emma paused, her hands stilling on the washcloth. I need to do something. I can't just sit around eating. You're food and taking up space. You're not taking up space. You're living here. There's a difference. She looked at him with those autumn leaf eyes, searching for the hidden meaning, the implied debt. When she found none, confusion flickered across her features. I don't understand you. What's to understand? Why are you being kind to me? What you want in return? Marcus set down his coffee cup and studied her face. Emma, has someone convinced you that kindness always comes with a price? The question hit its mark. Emma's shoulders tensed, and she turned back to the counter, scrubbing with renewed vigor. Doesn't it? Not here it doesn't. But Marcus could see that words alone wouldn't convince her. Trust, he was learning, was something Emma would have to feel rather than think her way into. So he continued his quiet routine, making space for her without pressure, offering help without strings attached. And slowly, incrementally, she began to relax. The nightmare started on the fourth night. Marcus woke to the sound of muffled crying from the room above, followed by Emma's voice, small and terrified, pleading with someone who existed only in her dreams. He lay in his bed, hands clenched into fists, listening to her distress and fighting the urge to go to her. She needed to know she was safe, but she also needed to know he wouldn't invade her privacy without permission. The next morning, Emma came downstairs with dark circles under her eyes and an apologetic expression. I'm sorry if I woke you, she said quietly. You didn't, Marcus lied easily. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Emma nodded but didn't elaborate. Instead, she busied herself with breakfast preparations, moving carefully around her growing belly. Marcus watched her pour orange juice with shaking hands and decided it was time to address the practical matters they'd been dancing around. Emma, he said gently, we need to talk about medical care. Her hand stilled on the juice pitcher. I told you, I can't go to the doctors. Even if something goes wrong with the baby. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma's free hand moved protectively to her belly, and Marcus saw fear flicker across her face. What if we found someone who could be discreet? He continued. Someone who wouldn't ask questions or require paperwork. People like that don't exist. They do in small towns, Marcus said. Dr. Catherine Mills has been delivering babies in this county for 30 years. She's helped plenty of women who needed privacy, teenage girls, women in difficult situations, people without insurance. She's not interested in anyone's business except making sure mothers and babies are healthy. Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering, what makes you think she'd help me? Because she helped Sarah when we couldn't afford proper prenatal care the first few months. Because she's never turned away anyone who needed help, and because I'd ask her to. The trust implied in that last statement wasn't lost on Emma. Marcus could see her weighing the risks, calculating the odds. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. But if she seems suspicious, if she asks too many questions, then we leave, Marcus finished. No questions asked. Dr. Mills lived 20 minutes outside of town in a converted farmhouse that served as both her home and her practice. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that had delivered half the babies in 3 counties. When Marcus called to explain the situation, vaguely, without names or details, she agreed to see Emma that afternoon. The drive into town was tense. Emma sat pressed against the passenger door, watching the landscape roll past with the intensity of someone memorizing escape routes. She wore a baseball cap pulled low and one of Sarah's old sweaters that Marcus had found in the closet. The sweater was too big, drowning her small frame, but it helped disguise her condition. What if someone recognizes me? She asked as they approached the edge of Millbrook Valley. From where? You said you were from up north. People travel. People have connections. What if there are pictures of me somewhere? Missing person reports. Marcus glanced at her profile, noting the way her jaw was set with determination tinged by fear. Are there missing person reports? Emma was quiet for several blocks. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe, probably not official ones, but ... She trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging. But unofficial ones, Marcus finished. People looking for you privately, yes. They drove the rest of the way in silence, Emma's tension palpable in the confined space of the truck. Marcus found himself taking a longer route, avoiding the main street and the busier parts of town. It was a small consideration, but he could see Emma relax slightly as they stayed on the quieter residential roads. Dr. Mill's office was in the back of her house, accessible through a separate entrance that offered privacy from the main road. The waiting room was small and comfortable, with soft lighting and chairs that actually looked designed for pregnant women. Emma perched on the edge of one, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. When Dr. Mills emerged from the back room, Emma's entire body tensed. The doctor was a small woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that somehow managed to be both authoritative and gentle. You must be Emma, she said, extending her hand. Marcus told me you could use some help. Emma shook the offered hand. Tentatively, thank you for seeing me, of course, dear. Why don't we go back and see how you and baby are doing? The examination room was warm and welcoming, with watercolor paintings of babies and mothers on the walls. Dr. Mills moved efficiently but gently, taking Emma's vital signs and asking careful questions about her health history. When was your last menstrual period? She asked, making notes on a chart. Emma's face flushed. I'm not sure exactly, maybe 10 months ago? Dr. Mills nodded without judgment. And when did you first notice you were pregnant? Around 5 months ago, maybe 6. Have you felt the baby moving? Yes, a lot lately, especially at night. Good, that's a very good sign. Dr. Mills set down her pen and looked at Emma directly. I'm going to need to examine you physically, check how the baby is positioned, and see how close you might be to delivery. Is that okay? Emma nodded, though Marcus could see her hands trembling. He started to leave the room, but Emma's voice stopped him. Could you stay? She asked quietly. Please? Marcus looked to Dr. Mills, who nodded her approval. Of course, he said, settling into a chair by the window where he could offer support without compromising Emma's privacy. The examination was thorough but gentle. Dr. Mills explained everything she was doing, her voice calm and reassuring. Emma lay rigid on the examination table, staring at the ceiling and breathing carefully through her nose. Everything looks good, Dr. Mills said finally, helping Emma sit up. Baby's in the right position, heartbeat is strong, and based on what I can tell, you're probably about 8.5 months along. When will the baby come? Emma asked. Could be any time next month. First babies sometimes come a little early, sometimes a little late. But we should start thinking about where and how you want to deliver. Emma's face went pale. I can't go to the hospital. I understand, Dr. Mills said without missing a beat. I still do home births for women who prefer them. If you're comfortable with it, I could deliver the baby at Marcus's farm. The relief in Emma's face was immediate and profound. You would do that? I've been delivering babies in farmhouses' living rooms and bedrooms for longer than you've been alive, Dr. Mills said with a smile. As long as there are no complications, it's perfectly safe. Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen. He hadn't realized how worried he'd been about the logistics of Emma's delivery until the problem was solved. What about paperwork? Emma asked. Birth certificates, hospital records? Dr. Mills studied her face carefully. There are ways to handle documentation that protect privacy while still ensuring the baby has legal status. We can discuss the details later, when you're ready. The drive home was markedly different from the drive into town. Emma sat back in her seat, one hand resting on her belly, looking more relaxed than Marcus had seen her since he'd found her in the barn. "She's nice," Emma said as they turned onto the country road that led to the farm. "She is. And she's good at what she does. Marcus?" Emma's voice was tentative. "What you said about her helping other women in difficult situations. Did you mean women like me?" Marcus glanced at her. "What do you mean, women like you?" Emma was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Women who are running from something. Women who can't use their real names or have their pictures taken or fill out official forms." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "She's helped women like that." "Good," Emma said, and there was relief in her voice. "I was worried I was the only one stupid enough to get into this kind of situation." "Emma," Marcus said firmly, "whatever situation you're in, it's not because you're stupid." She turned to look at him, surprise flickering across her features. "You don't know what I did, what choices I made. I know you're 17 and pregnant and scared. I know you've been taking care of yourself and your baby with no help from anyone. I know you'd rather live in a barn than put yourself in danger. None of that sounds stupid to me." Emma was quiet for the rest of the drive, but Marcus could see her processing his words. When they reached the farm, she moved differently, less like a fugitive checking escape routes and more like someone beginning to believe she might be safe. That evening, as they sat in the living room after dinner, Emma surprised him by asking about Sarah. What was she like? She said, her eyes on the photograph that sat on the mantel. Sarah, laughing at something off camera, her dark hair caught in mid-motion by the wind. Marcus followed her gaze. She was bright, not just smart, though she was that too. She had this way of seeing the good in everything, even when things were difficult. She could make friends with anyone, the mailman, the grocery store clerk, the grumpiest farmer at the feed store. "She sounds wonderful." She was. Marcus paused, surprised, to find that talking about Sarah didn't hurt as much as it used to. "She would have liked you." Emma looked at him skeptically. "How can you know that?" "Because she had a soft spot for anyone who was struggling. She volunteered at the women's shelter in town, helped teenage mothers, organized food drives. She believed everyone deserved a chance to start over. Even someone like me, especially someone like you." Emma touched the silver chain around her neck, her fingers finding the hidden pendant. "I wish I could have met her." "Tell me about the necklace," Marcus said gently. Emma's hand stilled. "What necklace?" "The one you're always touching. It's clearly important to you." For a moment, Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, she pulled the chain from beneath her shirt. The pendant was small and delicate, a silver locket in the shape of a heart, tarnished with age. "It was my mother's," she said quietly. "The only thing I have left of her." "What happened to her?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "She died when I was 15. Cancer. It was just her and me, and when she was gone." She shrugged, the gesture conveying more than words could about the cascade of events that had led her to this moment. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and meant it. "Losing a parent that young, it's not something anyone should have to go through alone." "I wasn't alone at first," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There were people who said they wanted to help, people who said they cared about what happened to me." The way she said it made Marcus's stomach clench. "But they didn't really want to help." Emma shook her head, tears spilling over. "They wanted other things. They wanted me to be grateful, to be compliant, to be whatever they needed me to be. And when I couldn't do that anymore, you ran. I ran." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I took what little money I had saved, got on a bus, and just started moving. I thought if I could get far enough away, they'd stop looking for me. And have they?" Emma's hand moved protectively to her belly. "I don't know. I hope so. But people like that, they don't like to lose control. They don't like it when their property walks away." The word property hung in the air like a curse. Marcus felt the familiar surge of protective anger, but he kept his voice calm. "You're not property, Emma. You're a person with rights and choices and the freedom to make your own decisions. Try telling them that. If I ever meet them, I will." Emma looked at him with something that might have been hope. "You really mean that, don't you?" "I really do." That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Emma's story and the pieces she was still holding back. He didn't need all the details to understand the broad strokes: a teenage girl orphaned too young, vulnerable people who preyed on that vulnerability, and a system that failed to protect those who needed it most. The specifics mattered less than the fact that Emma was here now, safe for the moment, with a chance to build something better for herself and her baby Dot in the room above. Emma was also awake, one hand on her belly, feeling the baby's restless movements. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to think beyond mere survival. She thought about baby names and cribs, and all the things she'd need to learn about caring for an infant. She thought about Marcus's kindness and Dr. Mill's gentle competence, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she and her baby could have a real life together. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and Emma smiled in the darkness. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise you, we're going to be okay." Outside, the wind moved through the trees around the farmhouse, carrying the sense of autumn and the promise of winter. But inside, warmth and safety prevailed. And for the first time in too long, the future seemed like something worth hoping for rather than something to fear. Marcus had given her more than shelter and food. He'd given her something she'd almost forgotten existed: the belief that there were still good people in the world. People who helped without expecting anything in return. People who saw worth in someone society had taught to see herself as. Disposable Dot. As she finally drifted toward sleep, Emma made a silent promise to herself and to the life growing inside her. Whatever came next, whatever challenges lay ahead, she would fight for this chance. She would fight for the right to raise her child in safety, to build a life free from fear, to become the mother her baby deserved. The old Emma, the frightened girl who had fled in the night with nothing but a backpack and desperate hope, was still there. But alongside her was growing someone new, someone stronger, someone who was learning that she had value beyond what others could take from her. And in the quiet darkness of the farmhouse, surrounded by the gentle sounds of a place where she was welcome, Emma began to believe that transformation was possible. 3 weeks into November, the first real snow arrived, blanketing the farm in pristine white that transformed the familiar landscape into something magical. Emma stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes drift down like feathers from a torn pillow, her breath fogging the glass. She'd never seen snow fall so peacefully before in the city where she'd grown up. Snow meant dirty slush and treacherous sidewalks, not this gentle transformation of the world into something clean and new. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, appearing beside her with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Emma accepted the warm cup gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the ceramic for the heat. "I've never seen it like this. So quiet and soft." "Snow has a way of making everything seem possible," Marcus said, watching her profile as she gazed out at the falling flakes. "Sarah used to say that snow was the earth's way of starting over, covering up all the old scars and giving everything a fresh beginning." Emma turned to look at him, something shifting in her expression. "Do you think that's true? That people can start over?" "I think some people can," Marcus said carefully. "But it takes courage to let go of what came before." Emma's hand moved to her belly, where the baby was performing what felt like gymnastics against her ribs. "What if what came before won't let go of you?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus had learned not to push Emma for details about her past, but moments like these revealed the depth of her fear. She wasn't just running from bad circumstances, she was running from people who wouldn't accept her freedom. "Then you keep moving forward anyway," he said finally. "And you let the people who care about you help build walls between you and whatever you're running from." Emma nodded slowly, but Marcus could see the doubt in her eyes. She'd been hurt too many times to fully believe in protection, even when it was freely offered. The snow continued to fall throughout the day, and by evening, the farm was buried under 6 inches of pristine white. Emma helped Marcus prepare dinner, moving more slowly now as her pregnancy advanced, but with increasing confidence in the kitchen. She'd become an excellent cook over the past weeks, approaching recipes with the same methodical attention to detail she brought to everything else. "Marcus," she said as they sat down to eat, "I've been thinking about names. For the baby?" She nodded, cutting her chicken into precise small pieces. "I was wondering, do you think it would be okay if I used Sarah as a middle name? If it's a girl, I mean." Marcus felt something catch in his throat. "Emma, you don't have to. I want to," she interrupted. "She would have been kind to me, wouldn't she? If she'd been here." "She would have loved you," Marcus said, and realized as he spoke the words that they were absolutely true. Sarah, with her fierce protective instincts and endless capacity for compassion, would have taken Emma under her wing immediately. "Then I'd like to honor that," Emma said simply. "Grace Sarah if it's a girl. Grace because that's what you've shown me here, grace I didn't deserve, but received anyway." Marcus had to look away for a moment, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gesture. "And if it's a boy?" Emma smiled, the expression transforming her face. "I was thinking of James. It means supplanter, someone who replaces what came before with something better." "James is a good, strong name," Marcus agreed. Sarah would have loved either choice. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Emma surprised him by asking about his work. Marcus ran a small organic farm, selling vegetables and herbs to local restaurants and at farmers markets. It wasn't lucrative, but it provided enough income to maintain the property and support his simple lifestyle. "Could you teach me?" Emma asked. "About farming, I mean, about growing things." Marcus looked up from the book he'd been reading. "You want to learn to farm?" "I want to learn to take care of myself," Emma said. "Really take care of myself, not just survive. I want to know how to grow food, how to preserve it, how to live independently. I want my baby to grow up knowing where food comes from and how to work with their hands." The determination in her voice was new, stronger than the careful gratitude she'd shown in her first weeks at the farm. Marcus could see Emma beginning to envision a future beyond mere survival, beginning to hope for something permanent and sustainable. "I'd be happy to teach you," he said. "Though most of the outdoor work will have to wait until after the baby comes and you've recovered." Emma nodded. "But I could learn the theory now, couldn't I? Read books, understand the principles." Marcus walked to the bookshelf and pulled down several well-worn volumes on sustainable agriculture, organic gardening, and small-scale farming. Emma accepted them eagerly, immediately opening the first book and becoming absorbed in its contents. Watching her read, Marcus felt a shift in his own perception of the future. For 3 years he'd been maintaining the farm more out of habit than purpose, going through the motions without real investment in what came next. But Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and he found himself imagining the coming spring with renewed interest, teaching her to prepare seedbeds, watching her learn to recognize the subtle signs that indicated when plants needed water or nutrients. Peaceful rhythm of their evening was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle coming up the drive. Marcus frowned. It was late for visitors, and the snow would make the rural roads treacherous for anyone unfamiliar with them. Emma immediately tensed, her hand moving instinctively to her belly as she listened to the approaching engine. "Stay here," Marcus said, moving to the window to peer out into the darkness. A large black SUV had pulled up near the house, its engine running and headlights cutting through the falling snow. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, and something about the vehicle's presence felt wrong, too official, too deliberate. "Emma," Marcus said quietly, "is there somewhere you can go? Somewhere in the house where you can't be seen from outside?" Emma was already moving, gathering the farming books and heading for the stairs. "The upstairs bathroom has no windows," she said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Go there. Take your phone. If anything happens, if you hear anything that sounds wrong, call Dr. Mills." Emma nodded and disappeared up the stairs, moving as quickly as her condition allowed. Marcus waited until he heard the bathroom door close before approaching his front door. Two men stood on his porch, both wearing expensive coats and professional expressions that didn't quite hide the underlying threat in their posture. One was tall and thin with prematurely gray hair, the other shorter and broader with cold blue eyes. Neither looked like they belonged in rural farming country. "Mr. Whitfield?" The taller man said. "I'm Detective Morrison. This is my partner, Detective Hayes. We're investigating a missing person case and wondered if we could ask you a few questions." Marcus didn't invite them in. "What kind of missing person case?" "A young woman, 17 years old, who disappeared from her home about 4 months ago. Her family is very concerned about her welfare." Morrison produced a photograph, a school picture of Emma, but different from the way Marcus knew her. In the photo, she looked younger, more polished, wearing makeup and jewelry that suggested wealth. Her hair was styled and her clothes expensive, but her eyes held the same wariness Marcus had learned to recognize. "Her name is Emma Catherine Blackwood," Morrison continued, watching Marcus's face carefully for any reaction. "Her family owns several businesses in the northern part of the state. They're quite worried about her, especially given her condition." "Condition?" Marcus asked, though he already knew what the man meant. "She's pregnant," Hayes spoke for the first time, his voice flat and uninterested. "About 8 months along now, which makes her situation particularly concerning. A girl that young, in her condition, alone on the streets, well, anything could happen." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear about your missing person, but I don't know anyone by that name. And I haven't seen any young women matching that description." Morrison's smile was cold. "We have reason to believe she might be in this area. She was seen getting off a bus in the next county over about 6 weeks ago. A pregnant teenager traveling alone tends to be memorable." "I'm sure she does," Marcus agreed. "But like I said, I haven't seen anyone matching that description." Hayes stepped forward slightly, his posture more aggressive. "Mind if we take a look around, just to be thorough?" "I do mind, actually," Marcus said calmly. "Unless you have a warrant, I'd prefer you didn't search my property." The two men exchanged a look. Morrison's professional smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Of course, we understand your desire for privacy. But I should mention that Emma's family is offering a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. $50,000 is nothing to sneeze at, especially for a man in your circumstances." The implication was clear. They knew about his financial situation, had done their research before coming here. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. "That's very generous of them," he said evenly. "But as I said, I can't help you." Morrison pulled out a business card. "Well, if anything comes to mind, or if you happen to see anyone matching Emma's description, please give us a call. Her family just wants her home safe, where she belongs." Marcus accepted the card without looking at it. Of course, the two men returned to their SUV, but they didn't leave immediately. Marcus watched from his window as they sat in the vehicle for several minutes, talking and occasionally looking toward the house. Finally, they drove away, their taillights disappearing into the swirling snow. Marcus waited a full 10 minutes before calling up the stairs. "Emma, they're gone." She appeared at the top of the staircase, her face pale and drawn. "What did they want?" "They showed me your picture, said your family was looking for you." Emma's laugh was bitter. "My family? Is that what they called themselves?" She came down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing for support. Marcus could see she was shaking, The weather from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. Emma, the name they gave me was Emma Catherine Blackwood. Is that your real name? She nodded reluctantly. It was. I don't use it anymore. They said your family owns businesses up north. They mentioned a $50,000 reward. Emma sank onto the couch, her face gray with exhaustion and stress. They're not my family, she said quietly. Not really. And that money isn't a reward, it's a bounty. Marcus sat down across from her, his mind racing. Tell me what that means. Emma was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was steady but hollow. After my mother died, I went into the foster system. But the Blackwoods, they have connections, money, influence. They arranged to become my guardians instead. That sounds like it should have been a good thing. It should have been, Emma agreed. At first, it seemed like it was. They had a big house, fancy cars, all the things my mother and I never had. They said they wanted to give me opportunities, help me make something of myself. Marcus could hear the but coming before she spoke it, but they expected things in return. Gratitude, compliance, absolute obedience. And when I got older, she trailed off, her hand moving protectively to her belly. When you got older, they expected other things, Marcus finished gently. Emma nodded, tears threatening. David Blackwood, he's not that much older than me, maybe 25. His parents thought we'd be a good match. They started talking about marriage, about how I could secure my future by becoming part of the family permanently. The pieces were falling into place, and Marcus didn't like the picture they formed. And when you refused, they reminded me that I had nowhere else to go, no money of my own, no family to turn to. They said I owed them for everything they'd given me, and that this was how I could repay that debt. So you ran. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. I tried to. The first time, they found me within 2 days. They brought me back, and Mrs. Blackwood explained very calmly that I belonged to them now, that I was their responsibility, and that running away was both ungrateful and dangerous. Marcus felt sick. And the pregnancy? Emma's face crumpled. David said it proved we were meant to be together. Mr. Blackwood said it gave them legal rights to keep me, that no court would separate a pregnant teenager from the stable family environment they provided. But you ran again. I waited until I was far enough along that they'd be less likely to force me to end the pregnancy. And I saved money, planned better. I thought if I could get far enough away, they'd give up looking for me. Marcus studied her face. But they haven't given up. They never give up, Emma said flatly. They see me as their property, and they don't let go of what belongs to them. Those men, they're probably private investigators, not real police. The Blackwoods have enough money to hire people to find me anywhere. Emma, are you sure those investigators will keep looking? Maybe they'll decide you're not here and move on. Emma shook her head. They'll be back. They'll ask questions in town, maybe offer money for information. And if they're convinced I'm in this area, ... She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. The Blackwoods wouldn't stop until they found her, and when they did, they'd take her back. They'd take her baby. They'd trap her in a life she'd risked everything to escape. We need to call Dr. Mills, Marcus said finally. She needs to know what we're dealing with. Emma nodded, though she looked terrified. Marcus, I'm sorry. I should have told you more about what you were getting into. I should have warned you that helping me could bring trouble to your door. Emma, Marcus said firmly, you have nothing to apologize for. You're the victim here, not the problem. But even as he spoke the words, Marcus's mind was racing ahead to the challenges they now faced. The Blackwoods had resources, connections, and the law on their side. Emma was a minor, technically still their ward. And they could probably make a compelling case that they were acting in her best interests. More immediately, if private investigators were combing the area, it was only a matter of time before someone in town saw Emma and made the connection. Small communities were notorious for their inability to keep secrets, and $50,000 was more money than most of the locals would see in several years. What do we do now? Emma asked, echoing his thoughts. Marcus looked at her. 17 years old, 8 months pregnant, exhausted by months of running and hiding, and felt his resolve harden. Whatever it took, however they had to do it, he would not let the Blackwoods take her back. Now we figure out how to keep you and your baby safe, he said. Permanently. That night, neither of them slept well. Marcus lay awake planning contingencies, thinking about legal options and safe houses and all the ways their carefully constructed peace could be shattered. In the room above, Emma held her belly and whispered promises to her unborn child, promises that they would never be trapped, never be owned, never be anything but free. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the tracks left by the black SUV and creating a pristine white world that looked peaceful and clean. But underneath the beauty, the danger remained, waiting for the right moment to surface again. Dr. Mills arrived at the farm before dawn, her medical bag in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. The urgency in Marcus's late-night phone call had told her everything she needed to know. Their window of safety was closing, and decisions had to be made quickly. Emma sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in one of Sarah's old quilts, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. She'd barely slept after the investigators' visit, starting at every sound the wind made against the house, every creak of settling timber. "How are you feeling, dear?" Dr. Mills asked, settling into the chair across from Emma and studying her. With experienced eyes, scared, Emma admitted, and tired. "The baby's been moving a lot. I think it can sense my stress." Dr. Mills nodded knowingly. Babies are remarkably perceptive, even in the womb. But we're going to take care of both of you. She turned to Marcus. "Tell me exactly what happened with these men." Marcus recounted the previous evening's events while Dr. Mills listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee cup. $50,000 is serious money, she said finally. That kind of reward will have people looking under every rock in 3 counties. "What can we do?" Emma asked. "I can't run anymore. The baby's too close to coming, and I have nowhere else to go." Dr. Mills leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "First, we need to establish your legal status. Emma, you said you're 17? I'll be 18 in 2 months. And the Blackwoods are your legal guardians?" Emma nodded reluctantly. "Until I turn 18 or get married." Dr. Mills and Marcus exchanged a meaningful look. "That gives us some options," the doctor said carefully. "But we need to move quickly." "What kind of options?" Emma asked, hope flickering in her voice. "In this state, pregnant minors have certain rights regarding their medical care and the welfare of their unborn children," Dr. Mills explained. "If we can document that returning to your guardians would be harmful to you or the baby, we might be able to get temporary protective custody transferred to someone else." Marcus felt his heart skip. "Someone like who?" "Someone like a responsible adult who's already providing care and shelter," Dr. Mills said meaningfully. "Someone who has the minor's best interests at heart." Emma's eyes widened. "You mean Marcus could become my guardian? Legally?" "It's possible," Dr. Mills said. "But it would require going to court, and that means exposure. Your location would become a matter of public record." The hope that had flickered in Emma's face dimmed. "The Blackwoods would know where to find me." "Yes, but they'd also have to prove in court that taking you back serves your best interests and the baby's. And if we can document abuse or coercion, ... It's my word against theirs," Emma said bitterly. "They have money, lawyers, connections. I'm just a pregnant teenager with no proof of anything they did to me." Dr. Mills reached across the table and took Emma's hand. "You might have more proof than you think. Have you seen a doctor since you've been here? Just you?" And I've documented your condition when you arrived malnourished, showing signs of chronic stress, no prenatal care for months. That's evidence of neglect at minimum. Marcus felt a spark of hope. What else would we need? Testimony from people who've observed Emma's condition and behavior since she's been here. Evidence that she's thrived in a safe environment. Documentation of any threats or coercive behavior from the Blackwoods. The investigators last night, Marcus said suddenly. They weren't exactly subtle about their intentions. What if we could get them to reveal their true purpose? Dr. Mills raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. They'll be back. Men like that don't give up after one visit, especially not with $50,000 on the line. What if we were ready for them next time? Marcus, that could be dangerous, Emma said. Alarm in her voice. Not if we do it right. Marcus turned back to them, his mind racing with possibilities. Dr. Mills, do you know Judge Patricia Coleman? Patricia? Of course she's delivered 3 of her grandchildren. Why? She's tough but fair, and she's not impressed by money or influence. If we could get this case in front of her. Dr. Mills caught on immediately. She'd look at the facts, not the bank accounts. But first we need those facts, Marcus said. We need evidence that Emma's better off here than with the Blackwoods. And we need to document any threats or coercion they try to use. Emma looked. Between them, her hand resting protectively on her belly. You're talking about setting a trap. I'm talking about protecting you and your baby, Marcus said firmly. But only if you're willing. This has to be your choice, Emma. Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been all morning. What would I have to do? The plan they developed was simple, but risky. When the investigators returned, and they all agreed it was a matter of when, not if Emma would be present, but hidden, recording their conversation with Marcus. They would try to get the men to reveal the true nature of their mission and the Blackwoods' intentions. The key, Dr. Mills explained, is to get them to admit that they're not actually law enforcement and to document any threats or coercive language they use. Marcus nodded. I can push them on their authority, question their jurisdiction. People pretending to be police officers don't like having their credentials examined too closely. And if they threaten you? Emma asked, worry creasing her features. Then we'll have that on record too, Marcus said. But Emma, you have to promise me, if anything goes wrong, if the situation feels dangerous, you get out of the house and go straight to Dr. Mills. Emma wanted to argue, but the determined look in Marcus's eyes told her it wasn't negotiable. Okay, she agreed, but you have to promise to be careful. I promise. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Dr. Mills showed Emma how to use her smartphone to make a clear audio recording, and they identified the best hiding spot, the pantry off the kitchen, which had a clear view of the living room but was concealed by a partially open door. Remember, Dr. Mills coached, we need them to identify themselves falsely, reveal who's really paying them, and ideally get them to make some kind of threat about what will happen if Emma isn't returned to the Blackwoods. What if they don't? Come back? Emma asked. They will, Marcus said with certainty he didn't entirely feel. The question is when. They didn't have to wait long. Late that afternoon, as the early winter darkness was settling over the farm, the sound of vehicles approaching broke the peaceful quiet. This time it wasn't just one SUV, there were 3 cars, and they moved with the coordination of a planned operation. Emma, go, Marcus said quietly, and she disappeared into the pantry. Her phone already recording. The knock on the door was more aggressive than the night before. When Marcus opened it, he found not just Morrison and Hayes, but 4 additional men, all wearing the same expensive coats and professional expressions. Mr. Whitfield, Morrison said, his tone noticeably less polite than before. We need to talk. About what? About the pregnant girl you're hiding in your house. Marcus kept his expression neutral. I'm not hiding anyone. Hayes stepped forward. "Sir, we have witnesses who saw a young woman matching Emma Blackwood's description in town 3 weeks ago. She was with a man driving a truck that matches your vehicle." "I go to town regularly," Marcus said. "I may have given someone a ride at some point, but I don't know any Emma Blackwood." One of the new men spoke up, a thick-set individual with cold eyes and an expensive watch. "Mr. Whitfield, let's stop playing games. We know she's here. We know you've been harboring a runaway minor. That's a federal crime, especially when the minor in question is pregnant and in need of medical care." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his voice steady. "Are you federal agents?" A brief glance passed between the men. "We're working in cooperation with federal authorities," Morrison said carefully. "I'd like to see some identification. Badges, warrants, something official." The thick-set man's expression darkened. "Mr. Whitfield, you're not in a position to make demands. Emma Blackwood is the ward of a prominent family who's very concerned about her welfare. They have legal custody, and anyone interfering with that custody is breaking the law. If you're law enforcement, you'll have proper documentation," Marcus pressed. "If you're not, then you're trespassing on my property." Hayes moved closer, his posture threatening. "Look, farmer, we're trying to be reasonable here. The Blackwood family just wants their daughter back safely. But if you continue to obstruct our investigation, things could get complicated for you." "Complicated how?" "Tax assessments, building inspections, environmental compliance checks," the thick-set man said with a cold smile. "Amazing how many violations investigators can find when they really look hard at a property." Marcus felt anger surge through him, but he maintained his calm exterior. "So you're threatening me?" "We're explaining the consequences of poor choices," Morrison said smoothly. "Mr. Blackwood is a very influential man with connections throughout state government. He doesn't like it when people interfere with his family. And what exactly would Mr. Blackwood like me to do? If Emma happens to be here, and we're not saying she is, she needs to come with us tonight. No drama, no complications. She receive the best medical care money can buy, and the baby will be born into a family that can provide for its every need. And if she doesn't want to go," Hayes laughed harshly, "she's 17 and pregnant, living in a barn like an animal until you took pity on her. What she wants is irrelevant. What matters is what's best for her and the baby. How do you know she was living in a barn?" The question caught them off guard. Morrison recovered first. "We've been thorough in our investigation." "Thorough enough to conduct surveillance on my property without a warrant?" "Thorough enough to know that Emma needs to come home," the thick-set man interrupted. "Tonight," Marcus looked at each of the men in turn. "And you're all working for the Blackwood family, not law enforcement?" "We're private investigators hired by the family to ensure Emma's safe return," Morrison admitted, apparently deciding that subterfuge was no longer necessary. "So you lied when you identified yourselves as detectives?" "We never specifically claimed to be police officers," Hayes said defensively. "You showed badges mentioned in investigation, implied official authority," Marcus countered. "That sounds like impersonating law enforcement to me." The thick-set man stepped forward aggressively. "Listen carefully, Mr. Whitfield. Emma Blackwood belongs with her family. If she's here, you will produce her now, or we will tear this property apart looking for her. And if you've touched her, if you've taken advantage of a vulnerable minor, Mr. Blackwood will make sure you pay for it." "I want you off my property," Marcus said firmly. "All of you, now." "We're not leaving without the girl," Hayes said. "Then you're going to be disappointed, because there's no girl here." Morrison pulled out his phone. "Mr. Blackwood isn't going to be happy about this delay. That's his problem, not mine." The 6 men conferred quietly among themselves before Morrison addressed Marcus again. "We'll be back tomorrow with a search warrant. And Mr. Whitfield? When we find Emma, and we will find her, any charges of kidnapping or statutory rape will depend entirely on Mr. Blackwood's mood. "Get off my property," Marcus repeated. The men retreated to their vehicles, but they didn't leave immediately. Marcus watched from his window as they made phone calls and appeared to be setting up some kind of surveillance operation. Finally, after about 20 minutes, 5 of the men left in 2 of the cars. The thick-set man remained, parking his SUV at the end of Marcus's driveway where he could observe the house. Marcus waited until he was sure the others were gone before calling softly, "Emma, you can come out." She emerged from the pantry, her face pale but her eyes bright with determination. "Did you get all that?" Marcus asked. Emma held up her phone. "Every word, including the threats, the admission that they're not police, and the confession that they've been conducting surveillance without authorization." Marcus felt a surge of hope. "That's solid evidence of harassment and intimidation. What do we do now?" "Now we call Dr. Mills and Judge Coleman. If we're going to court, we need to do it before they come back with whatever they're calling a search warrant." As Marcus reached for his phone, Emma grabbed his arm. "Marcus, what if this doesn't work? What if the judge sides with the Blackwoods?" Marcus looked into her worried eyes and saw not just fear, but something else, a growing strength, a determination to fight for her freedom and her child's future. "Then we'll figure out something else," he said. "But Emma, you're not going back to them. Whatever it takes, however we have to do it, you and that baby are going to be safe." Emma nodded, her hand moving to her belly. "I believe you," she said, and for the first time since he'd known her, she sounded like she really meant it. Outside, snow began to fall again, and the man in the SUV settled in for a long night of watching. But inside the farmhouse, plans were being made, allies were being called, and a 17-year-old girl who had been taught to see herself as property was learning that some people would fight for her right to be free. The battle for Emma's future was just beginning, but for the first time since she'd run away from the Blackwoods, she wasn't facing it alone. And that, she was beginning to understand, made all the difference in the world. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing the tension and urgency in the air. Emma placed both hands on her belly and whispered, "Hold on just a little longer, little one. We're going to win this fight." Judge Patricia Coleman listened to the recording 3 times before speaking, her steel-gray eyes never leaving Emma's face. At 68, she had presided over family court for more than 2 decades, and she'd developed an uncanny ability to distinguish between genuine distress and manufactured drama. What she saw in Emma Blackwood's face was unmistakably real terror. "This is highly irregular," Judge Coleman said finally, setting down her coffee cup in the small conference room behind her courtroom. It was nearly midnight, but she'd agreed to Dr. Mills' urgent request for an emergency hearing. "Bringing a case before me at this hour with minimal documentation, asking for an immediate transfer of guardianship, ... Your Honor," Dr. Mills interjected. Gently, "the circumstances are extraordinary. Emma is 9 months pregnant and could deliver at any time. The people claiming custody over her have made explicit threats and are conducting unauthorized surveillance. Every hour we delay increases the risk to both mother and child." Judge Coleman turned to Emma, who sat beside Marcus at the small table, her hands folded protectively over her belly. "Miss Blackwood, I need to hear from you directly. Do you understand what we're asking the court to do?" Emma's voice was steady, despite her obvious nervousness. "Yes, Your Honor. We're asking you to remove me from the Blackwoods' legal custody and place me under Marcus's guardianship until I turn 18. And why should I do that? Your current guardians have provided for you financially, given you a home, paid for your education. On paper, they appear to have fulfilled their responsibilities." Emma exchanged a glance with Marcus, drawing strength from his encouraging nod. "Because they didn't see me as a person to be cared for. They saw me as something they owned, something they could use however they wanted. That's a serious allegation. Do you have evidence beyond your own testimony?" Emma pulled out her phone and played a portion of the evening's recording. The part where the thick-set investigator explicitly stated that what she wants is irrelevant and that Emma Blackwood belongs with her family. Judge Coleman's expression darkened as she listened. These men claim to be working with federal authorities. They implied it initially, Marcus said. But when pressed, they admitted they're private investigators hired by the Blackwood family. They've been conducting surveillance on my property without authorization and have made explicit threats about what will happen if I don't surrender Emma to them. Dr. Mills, the judge said, you've examined Miss Blackwood. What's your professional assessment of her condition? Dr. Mills opened her medical bag and produced a thick folder. When Emma first came to me 6 weeks ago, she showed clear signs of chronic malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and psychological trauma. She had received no prenatal care throughout most of her pregnancy. In the weeks since she's been under Mr. Whitfield's care, her physical and mental health have improved dramatically. She handed several photographs to the judge before and after pictures that starkly illustrated Emma's transformation from a frightened, malnourished girl to a healthy, young woman glowing with the vitality of approaching motherhood. This level of improvement doesn't happen unless a person feels genuinely safe, Dr. Mills continued. In my professional opinion, returning Emma to the Blackwood household would be detrimental to both her health and the baby's welfare. Judge Coleman studied the photographs, then looked again at Emma. Miss Blackwood, I need you to tell me exactly what happened in the Blackwood home. Don't leave anything out. Emma took a shaky breath and began to speak. She told the judge about her mother's death, about being placed with the Blackwoods through their connections rather than the normal foster system. She described the gradual erosion of her freedom, the increasing pressure to be grateful for their generosity, and finally the explicit expectation that she would marry David Blackwood. When I refused, Emma said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke, they made it clear that I didn't have a choice. Mrs. Blackwood said I belonged to them now, that they'd invested too much in me to let me walk away. When I tried to run the first time, they brought me back and David said he was going to make sure I couldn't leave again. Is David Blackwood the father of your child? Emma's face went pale, but she nodded. I never consented to what happened. But when I told Mrs. Blackwood, she said it was proof that David and I were meant to be together. She said the baby would secure my place in the family permanently. Judge Coleman was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the implications. Mr. Whitfield, why did you decide to help Miss Blackwood? Marcus had expected this question and had thought carefully about his answer. Because when I found her in my barn, she was a pregnant teenager who needed help, and it was the right thing to do. But I continued helping her because I came to care about her welfare and the baby's future. Emma has shown remarkable strength and resilience despite everything she's been through. She deserves the chance to make her own choices about her life. And you're prepared to take legal responsibility for a 17-year-old girl and her infant? I am, Your Honor. I have the financial means to support them. A stable home, and Dr. Mills has agreed to continue providing medical care. Judge Coleman turned back to Emma. If I grant this emergency guardianship transfer, what do you plan to do? You'll still be a minor for 2 months, with a newborn baby to care for. Emma sat up straighter, her hand moving to the silver locket at her throat. I want to finish my education, Your Honor. I want to learn to support myself and my baby independently. Marcus has offered to teach me farming and sustainable living skills, and I plan to take advantage of that opportunity. When I turn 18, I want to be ready to provide for my child on my own. And after you turn 18? What's to stop the Blackwoods from continuing to harass you? We're prepared to pursue restraining orders and file criminal charges for harassment, intimidation, and surveillance without consent. Dr. Mills interjected. The recording from tonight provides clear evidence of criminal behavior. Judge Coleman leaned back in her chair, weighing the decision. This is highly unusual. Typically, These cases involve months of investigation, social services evaluations, extensive documentation. Your Honor, Emma said quietly, with respect, we don't have months. They're planning to take me tomorrow, whether I consent or not. And once they have me back. She trailed off, but the implication was clear. The judge studied Emma's face for a long moment. Miss Blackwood, are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Once I sign this order, there's no going back. The Blackwoods will likely challenge it, and you'll be thrust into a very public legal battle. I'd rather fight for my freedom in court than lose it in silence, Emma said firmly. Judge Coleman smiled, the first time her stern expression had softened all evening. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. She reached for her pen. I'm granting an emergency temporary guardianship transfer, effective immediately. Mr. Whitfield, you are now legally responsible for Miss Blackwood's welfare until she reaches the age of majority or until this court determines otherwise. Relief flooded through Emma so powerfully that she nearly sobbed. Marcus felt his own eyes well up as he watched her reaction. After months of running and hiding, she finally had legal protection. However, Judge Coleman continued, her voice stern again, this is a temporary measure. I'm scheduling a full hearing for next week, at which time the Blackwoods will have the opportunity to present their case. You'll need a lawyer, and you'll need to be prepared for them to bring significant legal firepower to bear. Dr. Mills spoke up. Your Honor, I know several attorneys who specialize in family law and have experience with cases involving guardianship abuse. I can make some calls. Good. In the meantime, Mr. Whitfield, I'm also granting you a temporary restraining order against the Blackwood family and their representatives. Anyone attempting to contact, harass, or intimidate Miss Blackwood or yourself will be in contempt of court. Judge Coleman signed several documents with efficient strokes of her pen. Sheriff Williams will serve these papers first thing in the morning. Until then, I suggest you all go home and get some rest. You're going to need it. As they left the courthouse, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face went white. Marcus, she said, her voice tight with panic. The message was from an unknown number. Emma, this is Mrs. Blackwood. We know where you are, and we're coming to bring you home. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Think about what's best for the baby. How did they get your number? Marcus asked. Emma's hand trembled as she held the phone. I don't know. I've been so careful. Dr. Mills took the phone and screenshot the message. This is evidence of continued harassment in violation of the restraining order that was just issued. Forward this to Judge Coleman immediately. But as they drove back toward the farm, they could see lights in the distance, multiple vehicles parked near Marcus's property. The Blackwoods hadn't waited for morning. Drive past, Dr. Mills said urgently. Don't turn into your driveway. Marcus continued down the road, his heart pounding. In his rearview mirror, he could see at least 6 vehicles parked around his farmhouse, including what looked like a moving truck. They're not just here to take me, Emma said, her voice hollow with realization. They're here to take everything all. My things, any evidence that I was ever here. Where can we go? Marcus asked. Dr. Mills was already dialing her phone. My house. It's small, but it's secure, and they don't know about it yet. As they drove through the dark countryside toward Dr. Mills' home, Emma felt the baby moving restlessly in her womb, as if sensing the renewed danger. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered, "Just a little longer, sweet baby. We're almost safe." But even as she spoke the words, she wondered if safety was something she'd ever truly experience. The Blackwoods had found her despite all. Their precautions had moved against her despite the legal protections they'd just secured. The battle for her freedom was far from over, if anything. It was just beginning. Dr. Mills' house was a small Victorian cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a garden that spoke of decades of careful tending. She led them through the back door into a cozy kitchen that smelled of herbs and fresh bread. You'll be safe here tonight, she assured them as she put water on for tea. But we need to think strategically about what comes next. Emma sank into a kitchen chair, exhaustion overwhelming her. What if we can't win? What if their money and connections are too powerful? Marcus sat beside her and took her hand. Then we keep fighting anyway. Emma, look how far you've come already. 6 months ago, you thought you had no choices, no options, no hope. Tonight, a judge declared that you have the right to determine your own future, but they're still out there. They're still trying to take me back. Yes, Dr. Mills said, setting cups of chamomile tea in front of them. But now they have to do it through the legal system, where they can't hide behind money and intimidation. They have to prove their case in open court, where judges like Patricia Coleman care more about what's right than what's profitable. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time the message was from David Blackwood himself. Emma, you're making a mistake. Come home and we can work this out. The baby needs stability, not this chaos you're creating. Dr. Mills read the message and shook her head. He still doesn't understand. He still thinks he owns you. Forward that to Judge Coleman too, Marcus said grimly. Every time they contact you, they're violating the restraining order. Emma sent the screenshot and turned off her phone. I don't want to see any more messages tonight. As the hours passed, they discussed strategy for the coming legal battle. Dr. Mills had already reached out to several attorneys, and one a woman named Rebecca Martinez who specialized in cases involving coercive control, had agreed to take Emma's case pro bono. Rebecca has a particular hatred for people who use wealth and power to control vulnerable individuals, Dr. Mills explained. She's never lost a case like this. What will I have to do? Emma asked. Tell your story. In detail, under oath, in front of a courtroom full of people, Dr. Mills said gently. It won't be easy. The Blackwoods lawyers will try to discredit you, paint you as an ungrateful runaway who doesn't know what's best for herself or her baby. Emma was quiet for a moment, considering. But I won't be alone this time. No, Marcus said firmly. You won't be alone. As dawn approached, Emma finally dozed fitfully in Dr. Mills' spare bedroom, one hand protectively curved over her belly. Marcus sat by the window, keeping watch, while Dr. Mills made phone calls to mobilize additional support. The battle for Emma's freedom had escalated beyond anything they'd anticipated, but they were no longer just 3 people against a powerful family. Judge Coleman had given them the law on their side. Rebecca Martinez was bringing legal expertise, and word was spreading through the small community about what was really happening. By morning, they would discover they had more allies than they'd ever imagined, and that sometimes, when people are faced with clear evidence of right and wrong, they choose to stand with those who need protection rather than those who have power. But first, they had to survive the night, knowing that just a few miles away, the Blackwoods were planning their next move, convinced that money and influence would ultimately triumph over a pregnant teenager's desperate fight for freedom. Emma stirred in her sleep, and the baby kicked hard against her ribs. Soon, she whispered in her dreams. Soon we'll both be free. Rebecca Martinez arrived at Dr. Mills' house at 7 in the morning with a briefcase full of legal documents and a fierce determination that Emma could feel the moment she walked through the door. The attorney was a woman in her mid-40s, with graying black hair pulled back severely and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She wore a simple but expensive suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had fought powerful opponents and won. Emma, she said, settling into the chair across from her new client, I've spent the night reviewing your case, and I want you to know something right up front. What the Blackwoods did to you has a name. It's called trafficking, and it's a federal crime. Emma blinked in surprise. Trafficking? But they didn't sell me, or... Trafficking isn't just about selling people across borders, Rebecca explained. It's about using force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor or commercial sex. acts from another person. When the Blackwoods used their position as your legal guardians to coerce you into a sexual relationship with their son, they were trafficking you. The word hung in the air between them, giving Emma's suffering a legal framework she'd never had before. Does that help our case? It transforms our case, Rebecca said with satisfaction. Instead of defending against their custody claim, we're going on the offensive. I'm filing federal charges against the entire Blackwood family, and I'm requesting that the FBI investigate their other business dealings. People who traffic one vulnerable person usually have a pattern of exploitation. Marcus, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. What does that mean for Emma's immediate situation? It means the guardianship hearing scheduled for next week becomes secondary to a federal investigation. It means the Blackwoods will be too busy defending themselves to pursue Emma, and it means, Rebecca's smile was sharp as a blade, that their money and connections suddenly become a liability rather than an asset. Emma felt a surge of hope mixed with apprehension. What will I have to do? Tell your story to federal investigators. Provide details about the coercion, the forced sexual contact, the threats they made when you tried to leave. It won't be easy, but Emma, you're not just fighting for your own freedom anymore. You're fighting for every other vulnerable person they might target in the future. The conversation was interrupted by a sharp contraction that made Emma gasp and double over. Dr. Mills was at her side immediately, timing the duration and checking her pulse. How long have you been having contractions? Dr. Mills asked. Emma breathed through the pain. Since about 4 this morning, but they weren't this strong. How far apart are they coming? Emma considered. Maybe every 20 minutes? They're getting closer together. Dr. Mills and Rebecca exchanged a meaningful look. Emma, Dr. Mills said gently, I think your baby has decided to join our legal team. What do you mean? I mean, you're in early labor, dear. This baby is going to be born within the next day or 2. Emma's eyes widened with panic. But the hearing is in 6 days. The federal investigation. I need to give my testimony. Emma, Rebecca interrupted calmly. Babies don't care about court schedules, and actually, this might work in our favor. How? Rebecca's expression was thoughtful. If you give birth while under Marcus's legal guardianship, with Dr. Mills attending the delivery, it establishes a clear pattern of responsible care. It also means that when the Blackwoods try to claim the baby, they'll be going up against established custody and medical records that show you and the child thriving under your current arrangement. Another contraction hit, stronger than the first, and Emma gripped the edge of the table. Marcus reached over and took her hand, his presence steady and reassuring. What about the FBI investigation? Emma asked when the contraction passed. The FBI can wait until after you've delivered and recovered, Rebecca said firmly. Your health and the baby's safety come first. Besides, the longer the Blackwoods go without knowing about the federal charges, the more likely they are to do something stupid that further incriminates them. As if summoned by her words, Emma's phone, which she'd turned back on to stay in contact with Rebecca, began ringing. The caller ID showed David Blackwood's number. Don't answer it, Rebecca said immediately, but put it on speaker. I want to hear what he says. The call went to voicemail, and David's voice filled the small kitchen. Emma, this is ridiculous. You're about to have our baby, and you're hiding in some stranger's house instead of being where you belong. I'm driving down there right now to bring you home. Mother has prepared the nursery, and we have the best doctor's money can buy waiting to deliver our child. Stop this foolishness and come home where you'll be safe. Rebecca was already taking notes. Did you hear that? Our baby, bring you home, where you belong. Classic language of ownership and control. And the implicit threat in, I'm driving down there right now, he's violating the restraining order. Dr. Mills was monitoring Emma's contractions while listening to the message. Emma, we need to make a decision about where you're going to deliver. My cottage is cozy, but it's not set up for childbirth. We could go to Marcus's farm. I have all my equipment there, but the Blackwoods know that location. What about the hospital? Emma asked. Hospitals require paperwork, insurance information, emergency contacts, Rebecca said. It would be very difficult to keep your location private, especially with the Blackwoods actively searching for you. Emma had another contraction, this one lasting nearly a minute. When it passed, she looked around at the three people who had become her chosen family. I want to go back to the farm, she said firmly. It's where I've felt safest, where I've been happiest. If this baby is going to be born into our fight for freedom, I want it to happen in the place where I first learned what freedom felt like. Marcus squeezed her hand. Are you sure? The risk, I'm sure, Emma said. Besides, we have legal protection now. If the Blackwoods try anything, they'll be violating a court order and a federal investigation. Dr. Mills nodded approvingly. Then we go back to the farm. Rebecca, can you arrange for some kind of law enforcement presence? Just in case? I'll call Sheriff Williams. He's the one serving the restraining order this morning. Anyway, he can station a deputy at the farm. During the delivery, as they prepared to leave Dr. Mills' cottage, Emma felt a profound sense of coming full circle. She'd fled the farm the night before as a frightened girl with no legal standing and no protection. She was returning as a woman with rights recognized. By law, all eyes committed to her cause, and a baby about to be born into freedom, rather than captivity. The drive back to the farm revealed the extent of the previous night's invasion. Tire tracks scarred the front yard, and several items of Emma's clothing lay scattered on the porch, where they'd apparently been dropped during the hasty retreat when the Blackwoods learned about the restraining order. Sheriff Williams was waiting for them, having just finished documenting the evidence of trespassing and harassment. Judge Coleman is not happy, he told them as they approached the house. Breaking into someone's home and conducting an unauthorized search is serious business, especially when it happens hours after a restraining order is issued. What does this mean for the Blackwoods? Rebecca asked. Sheriff Williams consulted his notes. Contempt of court charges, violation of a protective order, breaking and entering, harassment, and possibly stalking. If they contact Miss Blackwood or Mr. Whitfield again, they'll be arrested immediately. Emma felt another contraction beginning and leaned against Marcus for support. How long until they're actually served with the papers? My deputies are driving up to their estate right now, Sheriff Williams said. They should be getting the news within the hour. As if on cue, Emma's phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number, but when she answered cautiously, Mrs. Blackwood's imperious voice filled the air. Emma Catherine, this nonsense has gone far enough. I don't know what lies you've been telling these people, but you're embarrassing the family and endangering your child. David is beside himself with worry. Rebecca gestured frantically for Emma to keep the woman talking while she prepared to record the conversation. Mrs. Blackwood, Emma said, her voice steady despite the pain of another contraction. I've told the truth about what happened in your house. And a judge has decided that I'm safer where I am. Safer? Mrs. Blackwood's laugh was sharp and bitter. Living in a barn like an animal? Being taken advantage of by some farmer who's clearly after your inheritance? What inheritance? Emma asked, genuinely confused. There was a brief pause before Mrs. Blackwood continued, and Emma caught a note of something that sounded like panic in the older woman's voice. Your mother's estate, of course. The life insurance, the investments. She made for your future. Everything that we've been carefully managing for you. Emma looked at Rebecca, who was taking furious notes and making urgent hand gestures. This was clearly new information that could be crucial to their case. I wasn't aware my mother had left me an inheritance, Emma said carefully. Of course you weren't aware. You were 15 and grieving. We handled all the legal details to protect you from having to deal with such matters. But that money belongs to you, and it will be available when you turn 18. Assuming, of course, that you haven't done anything to jeopardize your standing with the family. The threat was subtle but clear: comply with the Blackwoods' demands or lose access to her mother's legacy. Rebecca was practically vibrating with excitement at this admission of financial manipulation. "Mrs. Blackwood," Emma said, another contraction making her voice tight, "I need to go." "I'm in labor? In labor?" The panic in Mrs. Blackwood's voice was unmistakable now. "Where are you? Who's attending you?" "Emma, you need proper medical care." Emma hung up the phone and immediately doubled over as the strongest contraction yet gripped her body. Dr. Mills was at her side immediately, helping her into the house and toward the bedroom that had been prepared for the delivery. "Rebecca," Dr. Mills called over her shoulder, "that conversation was recorded, right?" "Every word," Rebecca confirmed, including the admission about Emma's inheritance and the implicit threat about jeopardizing her standing with the family. As Emma settled into the room where she'd first felt safe, where Marcus had given her sanctuary and hope, she felt the baby moving decisively toward birth. The contractions were coming faster now, and Dr. Mills was efficiently setting up her medical equipment. "Marcus," Emma said during a brief respite between contractions, "will you stay with me?" "Of course," he said, taking the chair beside her bed. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, Sheriff Williams positioned his patrol car at the end of the driveway, a visible deterrent to anyone who might consider violating the restraining order. Rebecca set up a mobile office in the kitchen, preparing legal documents and coordinating with federal investigators who were beginning to take interest in the Blackwood family's business practices. As the afternoon wore on, Emma's labor progressed steadily. Between contractions, she and Marcus talked about the future, about baby names and first steps, about teaching the child to plant seeds and tend animals, about raising a person who would know from birth that they were free and loved and valued for themselves rather than what they could provide to others. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked during one quiet moment. Emma considered the question seriously. "About the birth?" "A little." "About being a mother?" "Terrified." "But about the Blackwoods?" She shook her head. "I'm not scared of them anymore. They can't touch us here. They can't undo what we've built together." As evening approached, Dr. Mills announced that the baby would likely be born within the next few hours. Emma's phone continued to buzz with calls from unknown numbers, the Blackwoods trying different tactics to reach her, but she ignored them all. This was her time, her choice, her moment to bring new life into a world where that life would be free from the moment it drew its first breath. The sun was setting over the farm, painting the snow-covered fields in shades of gold and pink. When Emma felt the overwhelming urge to push, Dr. Mills moved into position with the calm efficiency of someone who had delivered hundreds of babies, while Marcus held Emma's hand and whispered encouragement. "Almost there, dear," Dr. Mills said. "I can see the head. One more good push." Emma gathered all her strength, not just physical, but the emotional and spiritual strength she'd built over months of running, hiding, and finally fighting for her freedom, and brought her child into the world with a fierce determination that surprised everyone in the room. The baby's cry filled the farmhouse strong, healthy, and absolutely perfect. Dr. Mills quickly checked vital signs before placing the infant on Emma's chest, where mother and child looked at each other for the first time with wonder and instant recognition. "It's a girl," Dr. Mills announced with tears in her eyes. "A beautiful, healthy baby girl." Emma looked down at her daughter, at Grace Sarah, who would carry the names of two women who had shown her what love and courage looked like and felt. A transformation more profound than any she'd experienced before. She was no longer just Emma, the frightened girl running from people who claimed to own her. She was Grace's mother, and that identity would define and strengthen her for the rest of her life. "Hello, sweet baby," she whispered, touching the tiny fingers that immediately grasped her own. Welcome to your free life. Outside, the last light faded from the winter sky, and the farm settled into peaceful quiet. The battle with the Blackwoods was far from over, but tonight belonged a new life, new hope, and the profound understanding that some things love freedom. The bond between mother and child could never be bought or controlled or taken away. Grace. Sarah opened her eyes and looked directly at her mother, as if to say she understood perfectly that she had been born into a fight worth winning. 6 weeks after Grace Sarah's birth, the Blackwood family empire came crashing down. Rebecca Martinez stood in the federal courthouse, holding a thick folder of indictments as reporters crowded around her on the courthouse steps. Today, the Department of Justice has filed charges against Richard, Margaret, and David Blackwood for human trafficking, financial fraud, and conspiracy, she announced to the assembled media. Their systematic exploitation of vulnerable minors has been exposed, and justice will be served. The investigation had uncovered far more than Emma's case. Financial records revealed a pattern of taking guardianship of orphan teenagers, controlling their inheritances, and using coercion to exploit them for labor and sexual purposes. Emma's mother's estate alone was worth nearly $500,000 money. The Blackwoods had been using for their own purposes while telling Emma she was penniless. At the farm, Emma sat in the rocking chair Sarah had once used, nursing Grace and watching the news coverage with quiet satisfaction. Marcus worked at his desk nearby, preparing for the spring planting season and planning the expanded garden that would help support their growing family. "Do you ever regret fighting them?" Marcus asked during a commercial break. Emma looked down at her daughter, who was gazing up at her with the serious expression babies sometimes wore, as if contemplating the mysteries of the universe. "Never. Grace deserves to grow up knowing she was born free, that her mother fought for that freedom, and that good people helped make it possible." The doorbell rang, and Dr. Mills entered carrying a cake decorated with tiny fondant vegetables. "Happy 2-month birthday, Grace," she said, kissing the baby's forehead. "And congratulations on your legal victory, Emma." The final court hearing had been almost anticlimactic, with federal charges pending and overwhelming evidence of abuse. The Blackwoods' lawyers had withdrawn their custody petition entirely. Emma's guardianship had been formally transferred to Marcus until her 18th birthday, just 3 weeks away. "What's the latest from Rebecca?" Dr. Mills asked, settling into her favorite chair by the window. "The Blackwoods are facing 25 years minimum," Emma replied. "Their assets have been frozen, and the court has ordered restitution to all their victims. I'll have access to my mother's inheritance when I turn 18, plus damages." Marcus looked up from his work. "More importantly, there are 6 other young people who are finally free from their control." Emma nodded. The investigation had led to the rescue of teenagers held in similar circumstances across 3 states. Some had been forced into domestic labor, others into inappropriate relationships with family members or business associates. All had been told they were orphans with no resources when they actually had substantial inheritances being stolen from them. "I want to help them," Emma said suddenly. "The other survivors. I want to use my inheritance to create a foundation, a safe house where teenagers can go when they're escaping situations like mine." Dr. Mills smiled. "That sounds like something your mother would have been proud of." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Emma felt Grace's tiny hand curl around her finger with surprising strength. This little girl would never know what it felt like to be owned, to be treated as property, to have her choices made by people who saw her as a commodity rather than a person. "She looks like you," Marcus observed, studying the baby's features. "She looks like hope," Emma corrected. "Like possibility. Like everything good that came from something terrible." That evening, as Marcus prepared dinner and Dr. Mills told stories about her own grandchildren, Emma walked onto the porch holding Grace. The farm spread before them in the gathering dusk, peaceful, productive home. The barn where she'd once hidden in fear now housed Marcus's horses, and the beginnings of their expanded operation. The fields that had seemed so empty and desolate that first morning now held the promise of spring crops and new growth. Emma's phone buzzed with a text. From Rebecca, David Blackwood sentenced today. 15 years in federal prison. He'll never hurt another girl like he hurt you. Emma read the message and felt not triumph, but a quiet sense of closure. Justice had been served, but more importantly, she and Grace were safe to build whatever life they chose. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, joining her on the porch. Emma bounced Grace gently, smiling as the baby cooed at the sound of his voice. I'm thinking about the future. About teaching Grace to plant seeds and tend animals. About her first day of school, and her first heartbreak, and all the choices she'll get to make because she's free to make them. And what about your future, your choices? Emma looked at him, this man who had found her at her lowest point and shown her what unconditional kindness looked like. I choose gratitude. I choose family. I choose to build something beautiful on the foundation of everything we've survived together. Marcus smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. That sounds like a good choice. As the stars appeared overhead, Emma whispered to her daughter about the woman whose name she carried, Sarah, who would have loved her fiercely, and Emma's own mother, who had fought to give her daughter every opportunity for a good life. Grace gurgled softly, as if she understood that she was the living embodiment of love conquering fear, hope triumphing over despair, and the unshakable truth that everyone deserves the chance to be free. The nightmares no longer came. The constant vigilance had relaxed into peaceful awareness. The girl who had once hidden in a barn, pregnant and terrified, had become a woman who could hold her child in the open air and know with absolute certainty that they were both exactly where they belonged. Sometimes the quietest victories are the most profound, not won in courtrooms or announced in headlines, but lived out in small moments of safety, in the luxury of making free choices, in the simple ability to love and be loved without conditions or expectations. Emma had learned that freedom wasn't just the absence of oppression, it was the presence of hope, the possibility of growth, the right to determine your own path forward. And as she stood on the porch of the farm that had become her sanctuary, holding the daughter who represented her future, she understood that the best revenge against those who tried to steal your freedom was to use that freedom to build something beautiful. Grace Sarah Whitfield would grow up knowing she was wanted, valued, and free. That knowledge would be her inheritance, far more valuable than any amount of money, more powerful than any legal victory. It would be the foundation upon which she built her own life, made her own choices, and perhaps one day helped other people discover their own freedom. The story that had begun with a desperate girl hiding in a barn had become something larger, a testament to the power of choosing kindness over indifference, courage over safety, and love over fear. And it would continue generation by generation, in the lives of all the people touched by one young woman's refusal to accept that she could be owned. Freedom, Emma had learned, was not a destination but a daily choice. And she chose it every day, for herself and for her daughter and for everyone who had helped her believe it was possible. The farm was quiet now, peaceful under the stars, full of promise and new beginnings. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.